Hey, my friends, it's Leah with your Winning Wednesday, WINSDAY, coming to you on a beautiful afternoon. I hope everyone's having a wonderfully winning day and a fabulously winning week in the Lord. I'm so excited to be talking about this today. The word for today is time. And with that, I want to share about a time, an event that's coming up with you. Our event is called Lady Spark Day, and it's second annual, hosted by Wellington, Texas Church of the Nazarene, and we want to invite you to be part of that. It's October 28th, which is a Saturday, October 28th from 9 a.m. to noon, and it is a free brunch to everyone who attends, and so we would love to invite you to come and attend that with us. Our speaker is going to be Candy Gibbs from Hope Choice, and our worship leader is Kayla Simpson. So we want to invite you to come, and all you have to do is make a reservation. No cost involved, just make a reservation. So if you would call or text 806-570-9528 and let us know you're coming and how many people you're bringing, we hope that you will make plans to attend. Again, that's October 28th, which is a Saturday, from 9 a.m. to noon. And that's at 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington, Texas, hosted by Wellington, Texas Church of the Nazarene. 806-570-9528. Just text or call and let us know you're coming so we can be ready for your arrival. So that said, let's get into today's word, time. Time. It's one of those things, why does it seem like everybody has the same amount, but sometimes it just doesn't work out for us? Let's look at what it means. What is time? It's one of those words that's really kind of difficult to define, because even when you look it up in the dictionary, you understand what it means, but it's hard to put into words. So let me just read to you some of the things that I found about it. What is time? Time defined as this. One definition says, as a whole, indefinite continued progress of existence and events in the past, present, and future. So for instance, it's saying like you travel through time. So from your birth to your death, you're traveling through time. And someone who is a great athlete or a great musician is often known as the greatest of all time. And so it's talking about general terms. Maybe someone who's in the spotlight for a while, it was their time to shine. So when you speak of the word in that way, it's kind of a generalized term. Another definition is a particular point of time with measurement of hours and minutes designated as distance from midnight or noon. So for instance, you could say it's 8 a.m. So it is 8 hours from midnight, or it's 8 p.m. So it's 8 hours from noon. So that's talking about that designation of a specific period of time. Another definition is for a plan or schedule or an arrangement for an event to occur. So you could say the wake-up call was timed for 6 a.m. or the test was timed to be completed in an hour. Possibly the fastest runner finished the course in X number of minutes or X number of seconds, depending on the length of the race. Another definition is this: the part of existence that is measured in minutes, days, weeks, months, years, etc., eras, millennia, and that kind of thing. So all of these define time. So let's break it down and let's talk about this biblical application of time, as we like to do. So let me just share this with you. When people began marking the time of day, it was based upon the local position of the sun or solar time. So wherever they were, they looked at the position of the sun and they based the time of day on that. And of course, different parts of the world, the sun is going to feel like it's in different places. So sundials, of course, were used as the early clocks. They were the first clocks, allowing the shadow that was created from the rotation of the earth in proximity to the sun to reveal the hour or the time of day. So the shorter shadows were the earlier part of the day and the longer shadows were the latter part of the day. And so not until the mid-1800s was there a need for standardized time between different areas of the world. And the creation of the railway system and travel is what instigated this need for a standardized time, so that everyone could kind of have an idea of what to expect in the railways. When would the train arrive? Well, it just depends on where you live. And so they knew that they had to standardize the time that everyone could expect certain things. So in 1847, Britain established Greenwich Mean Time, so the clocks were synchronized for the timing of the railways. And then international travel and commerce continued to increase, which necessitated a universal time standard. And so from 1847 all the way up to 1972, countries were adding this standardized way of marking time for daily life, travel, and commerce, because it was continually being added as countries were needing this commerce and needing these things and needing things brought to them. So the standardized time, and of course air travel probably changed everything again, so people could know when to expect an airplane to arrive and all of that. So time, of course, is continuous. The sun rises and sets every day, even if we can't see it because it's obscured with clouds or whatever, it's still going to happen. And so the earth turns on its axis. If you took science at any time in your life, you learned this, that the earth turns on its axis. And with each rotation, one side of the earth sees the dawn while the other side of the earth sees the dusk. So it just happens over and over and over again as the earth turns. The Bible, of course, speaks to time and even to the initial marking of it. So let's start out by looking at that. And of course, that's found in Genesis chapter 1. So the first record of time was written in Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 to 5. This is where it says, "Then God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day." So this was the initial marking of time as a day being a specific period from the sunset to the sunrise. And so God divided the light from the dark. He divided light from dark. And by the sun and the moon, remember, he said, that the light was, or that the day would be governed by the sun and that night was governed by the moon. So he commanded the sun and the moon and the stars to divide these two time periods between day and night. And God put into place, by doing this, that natural law of day and night. So this law is that 24-hour period of time that marks a day. So that those days of creation, then that was set in motion, that time frame was set in motion. So each day of creation ended with evening and began with morning. Each day still ends with evening and begins with morning, doesn't it? So we know that this is a law of nature that God set in motion at that time. So the word day, just for some trivial information for you, the word day appears in the Bible 1,561 times. And in every instance, with very few exceptions, it is talking about a literal time period of evening to morning being a day. A literal 24-hour period is what this is talking about. Each reference talks about that literal day, unless it is speaking of or about time as a qualifying statement or as a whole. For instance, the day of the Lord or the day of judgment. Those are the exceptions to this. Every other time, it's talking about a literal 24-hour period. So that's just kind of an interesting piece of trivia for you, biblical trivia for you to have. 1,561 times that word day is used in the Bible. So there's a time for all things. And Solomon talks about this in Ecclesiastes. I want us to look at this passage of scripture out of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and it's verses 1 through 11. He reveals the 28 seasons of human life. And I want us to just take a look at that. We're not going to look at all of them today, of course, but I want us to just get an overview of what Solomon is talking about here, because it is something that we all can relate to, because it is just the reality of humanity. So let's look at this Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 11. And it says, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. What profit has the worker from that in which he labors? I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time. So Solomon took these words of wisdom and he gathered them all together. That's what that word Ecclesiastes means. It means a gathering. So he gathered together all these thoughts of his wisdom and he put them in a writing. And he wrote them down in this book of Ecclesiastes, and he wrote some down in the book of Proverbs. And so in this particular passage from Ecclesiastes, he's talking about the seasons of life. And when we think about seasons of time in a human's life, we think about babyhood. And then we think about childhood. And we think of the teen years, and then young adulthood, and then the mature years, and then the years of wisdom. So there are all of these seasons of a person's life they go through. And there are also seasons of days that are actual weather seasons. So it's spring and summer and autumn and winter. So we know that all of these seasons affect all of us, because even when you look at the seasons of life, people actually call those spring, summer, winter, or spring, summer, fall, and winter, because it's different seasons of our lives where, we're sowing and we're reaping and we're doing different things, and that time of becoming dormant until it's time to do something new. So there are all kinds of seasons of life. And so Ecclesiastes talks about these. And then we can come back over to Genesis chapter 8. And I want us to look at this. This is after the flood that Noah had endured. Noah and his family, they went through the flood with these animals, and everything had been destroyed. And then God was making a new covenant with creation at this time with Noah. And so in Genesis chapter 8, after this great flood of Noah's time, God made this covenant with creation. And in verses 20 through 22, it says, then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. So he made this covenant to say, I will never again destroy or curse the ground, and it will not destroy humanity like I have in this time, because I know that man's heart is on evil. And so I'm going to do something different here. He says, I'm not going to do this again like I've done. And in verse 22, he says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. So he says, these natural laws are set in place, and they're going to continue. God's made this statement in this covenant that he made with creation with Noah here, that all of these things, natural laws that are already set in place, are going to remain. So he gives us these seasons of time to accomplish certain things. So if we take all of this information that we've just looked at out of Genesis and Ecclesiastes, and then we move over into the New Testament, the era in which we live, these last days. So again, those are the days after Jesus' ascension. So we are living in those last days. Galatians chapter 6, again, talks about sowing and reaping, seed time and harvest. So let's look at this in Galatians 6, that it tells us that whatever we sow in a season of sowing, that is what we will reap in the season of the harvest. So in Galatians 6, verses 7 through 10, it says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Why does he say this? Because we read back in Genesis chapter 8 that God set these laws in place. He set them in place. We read about it in chapter 1 of Genesis, and then we know that they are still in place even after the flood in Genesis chapter 8. We know that they're in place in Ecclesiastes because Solomon talked about all of these seasons. So then in the New Testament, in Galatians, Paul is writing this letter to the church at Galatia, and he says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Some versions say, if you don't faint. Don't let yourself faint. Don't wear yourself out. Just keep on going. Keep moving forward. In verse 10, it says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. So Paul is re-emphasizing again that there is this law of sowing and reaping. And it's a natural law about sowing seed and harvesting what you plant. And it's also a spiritual law about sowing into life what God has purposed for you to sow into life. And are you going to sow into that spiritual realm in the right way, or are you going to sow corruption? Because if you sow bad seed, you're going to reap corruption. But if you sow good seed, then you're going to reap a harvest from that. Your harvest is going to be a harvest of love and goodness and grace and mercy and all of those things. Whatever you sow, spiritually speaking, is also what you reap. And this is talking about right now, but it's also talking about in eternity. So it is important for us to understand that what we do right now, we reap that harvest in eternity. So we need to understand this. This is a natural law and it is a spiritual law. So it happens right now in the natural and it happens in the spirit as well. So it's a spiritual law for now, because if you sow discord, you're going to reap the harvest from that. But if you sow love, you're going to reap a harvest from that now. But you are also going to reap, or I should say, and you are also going to reap a harvest from what you sow here in eternity. So it's important for us to understand that. So when we look at all of these things and we bring it all together, I want us to look at something that David said in the Psalms. David was praying about, he was being surrounded by his enemies, and he was going to the Lord and he said, God, I trust in you. You are my God, and I'm going to take refuge in you. And so in Psalm chapter 31, verses 14 and 15, where David is calling upon the Lord, he trusted in the Lord for deliverance and for mercy in the face of his enemies. And here's what he said in verses 14 and 15 of Psalm 31. As for me, I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. And here's what I want us to see. My times are in your hands. So we all have those same number of hours in every single day. Time is the same for each and all of us. Every one of us, it's from evening to morning, evening to morning, evening to morning. It's the same number of hours for all of us, no matter where we live on the earth. We have the same number of hours in each period of a day. So let's place ourselves in God's hands, fully trusting and relying on him and his wisdom, asking him to strengthen us to fulfill his plan and purpose for our lives, so that our times are in his hands, and that we sow seeds of his love and grace and goodness, born of his spirit that is alive and dwelling within us. If we sow seeds from the Spirit in that way, then the harvest that we reap is going to be a bountiful harvest of goodness, of God's great goodness and love and grace and mercy. And I'm just so excited about that, because it is such a good lesson for us. We need to spend today doing what God calls us to do, so that we can reap a harvest here, and that the harvest that we reap in eternity is worthy of God's goodness and God's grace upon us. What a good word for us today. Time. Make every moment count. Make every moment count. When you get up in the morning, say, God, I desire to spend my time with you. I desire to fulfill my day doing what you have purposed for me to do. And when you do that, when you fulfill, or when you fill your heart with a desire to serve the Lord and to do what he has called you to do, I guarantee you the harvest that you reap is going to be a bountiful harvest of God's goodness in your life right now and for eternity. Great word for us today, time. And with that said, I would like to just share with you that every Wednesday, speaking of times and designated times, every Wednesday at 6 p.m., we have a time designated for some special programs. We have a program for women's Bible study at 6 p.m. We have a program for our youth at 6 p.m. and we have a program for our young students, our elementary age students, at 6 p.m. So everything on Wednesday night starts at 6 o'clock. We've got classes for all students of all ages, so pre-K through 12th grade. We also have a nursery if you need a nursery, and we've got a women's Bible study. All of those things start at 6 p.m. We also will feed your kiddos and have supper there together at 6 o'clock there at the church. So that's at 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington, Texas. So if you are in Wellington or if you are in the Wellington area, we invite you to come on Wednesday nights and join us for our different studies. Again, we have studies for all students from pre-K all the way through 12th grade, and then we have a women's Bible study. All of those things begin at 6 o'clock. So we eat supper, we have some worship music and our lesson, and it's a wonderful time together. So I hope that you will make plans to join us on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock, 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington, Texas. I also want to invite you to come on Sundays. We meet at 10 o'clock in the morning for Sunday school and discipleship classes. We've got something for everyone, people of all ages, from nursery all the way to the eldest adult. And that's at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sundays. And then that is followed by our worship service that begins at 11 o'clock on Sundays. And again, that is Wellington, Texas Church of the Nazarene, 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington, Texas. If you are in the Wellington area, we'd love to meet you face to face and have you join us in person. If you are not in Wellington, we live stream our services at the 11 o'clock service, and we live stream it on our Facebook page right now. It's Wellington TX Church of the Nazarene. So we'd love for you to join us there. I hope that everyone has a wonderfully winning day, a fabulously